more like to look at, say, the example of Dismember that did one album that was maybe a little bit more like melodic and accessible, and then they kind of said, what the fuck, this isn't us. We play fast death metal, let's do that. And to a certain extent, that's us too, minus the Wimpy album or something.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
I'm Burke from Drawn and Quartered, vocalist and bassist.
And Herb, you've been on the podcast once before, but for people who didn't hear that episode, what is Drawn and Quartered? How would you describe the music that you make?
Would describe it as death metal. And this is death metal in the old sense of down-tuned riffs, guttural vocals, lots of blasting drums, not a lot of modern crap. It's extreme, it's fast, it's brutal, it's also tuneful and memorable.
So, we last spoke in 2021. We had a pretty extensive conversation about the history of the band, your songwriting process, leading up to the release of your previous album, Congregation Pestilence. Catch me up on what you've been up to since then. What's been going on with Drawn and Quartered since 2021?
Well, the world is about to see the product of what's been going on with the release of Lord of Two Horns. We've also been doing some more extensive than in the past live work. We did a Midwest and East Coast tour in 2023 and also traveled to Berlin to perform at the Nuclear War Now festival, which was pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah. When we last spoke, you guys were a trio, and I believe that you now have a second guitarist. Is that correct?
That's correct. We've added Brandon Corsair on second guitar. So now we're a two-guitar band. It's happened, it's something that we've actually tried to do a few times over the history of the band. It's never really worked out well for different reasons in pretty much each case. But this has worked well so far. He's been playing second guitar with us for 2-3 years. Jeez, time flies. I don't even know what day it is. But yeah, it's the story there. Lord of Two Horns is basically still executed as a three-piece for all intents and purposes, though. It wasn't involved in the writing or recording of that record.
I think people might know Brandon from being in the bands Dragcar and Azaf.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, he was based in LA, right? He was based in California, and you guys were in Washington State.
Yeah. I think he relocated around the time of the plague, and the rest is history.
Did you guys know him beforehand, before he became part of the band?
Yeah. I think there had actually been Drakkar played performed in Seattle on a tour they did. And for a while, Kelly also played with Drakkar.
I see. Okay.
So sort of a two-way street there for a little while, but he isn't doing that anymore. It's just focusing on Drawn and Quartered and Plague Bear.
Kelly is, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Brandon's still playing with Drawn and Quartered.
Okay. Why was Brandon the guy? Was it something about the other projects that he does? Was the style very natural for what you guys do?
Yeah. I mean, Drakkar's death metal, bit of a different style, but he knows the music and he knows how to play it. And so obviously he had to, learn Drawn and Quartered material and the playing style, adapt to the playing style at least. But he's been able to do that just fine. So it's worked out really well.
So the last time we spoke, you mentioned that you already had the material for Lord of Two Horns, and that some of the material was actually older than the material on Congregation Pestilence.
True.
In terms of finishing up the material and the arrangements, what was that process like?
Well, there were kind of two parts. When the material was first written, there was We did actually start rehearsing it for a period of time. And then for a bunch of different reasons, that was basically put on hold. And so then when time came to get back to it, we all got back to rehearsing it, kind of relearned it more or less. And we also worked out the arrangements a little bit, added a couple of parts, extended a couple of parts. But otherwise, it was pretty much as Kelly had written it. And we just, as we worked on it, started to see a couple spots that, maybe it could be improved just a little if we did this thing here. And that's what we did. And otherwise, it's pretty much the material as written.
You guys have been pretty consistent from album to album. Kelly handles most of the riff writing, but was there a heading into that first album to now like a very solid idea of what drawn and quartered is and what drawn and quartered should be?
I'm inclined to say yes. I don't know that I could necessarily speak for the band. It's felt to me like there is a very specific vision that's, rooted in the old school death metal of the early 90s and just trying to take that into a place where it's our own thing and see what all we can do with it.
Yeah. When we last spoke, we talked about the longevity of the band and your legacy and what you guys still want to accomplish with this band. And you mentioned you wanted to make the ultimate drawn and quartered album. Is that what this is? Is Lord of Two Horns the ultimate album?
Perhaps. I'll let other people make that decision. We are certainly proud of it and hold it in high regard, but we also don't feel like, we've necessarily reached a pinnacle. This could be just another step to even more and even greater. And I think that's what we're probably, aiming for.
I mean, it's interesting, from the outside looking in, I feel like you guys have always had a clear vision of what you wanted to be, and there weren't a lot of, digressions the way a lot of death metal bands had, maybe at various periods in time, experimenting with different things here and there. And there were a lot of bands who, maybe through no fault of their own, released an album early on in their career, maybe even their first album, and never really lived that down. Like I think of, Left Hand Path being maybe a really good example of a band, of an album that, it was so influential that like, how can you ever top that? And maybe Ultras of Madness was the same way. Do you know what I mean? For you guys, I mean, it's interesting for me to hear that with the body of work that you have and the amount of time you've been around, there's still something that you're pushing for. There's still something you want to accomplish with this music that you feel you haven't done yet. Is it from a musical perspective, like maybe technique wise or songwriting wise, something that you feel you always can push and you can always better yourselves at?
Perhaps, it's creativity and drive. And, you mentioned how, a lot of bands playing death metal or extreme metal or whatever you want to say might peak early on the first album or two, or go through some stylistic changes. And I can make some guesses as to why that's something that we haven't done. I mean, number one, it's just not something we've been interested in. But we also got to see Entombed and, countless other bands, like you mentioned, sort of change style and go into something else. And I think I more like to look at, say, the example of Dismember, that did one album that was maybe a little bit more like melodic and accessible, and then they kind of said, what the fuck, this isn't us. We play fast death metal, let's do that.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, that's us too, minus the wimpy album or something. We know we do this well. And also I feel like, I don't know, just there's always been room to expand and improve on what we've done before. And I mean, I suppose that could be said about any other band that didn't follow this sort of path, but it doesn't always work out that way.
How much of that is a result of the era that you guys came up in, when you guys were writing and recording your first albums at a time when death metal was really unpopular? Do you know what I mean? And you guys were really going against the grain during the 90s in terms of what other people, in terms of what the audience was, and what maybe the record industry was interested in signing and releasing. And you guys just really went on your own path in terms of like this very true, very old school death metal style.
Yeah, I suppose that it could also be, kind of a fuck you to all of that. When it's like, okay, we're going to start out when people just don't give a shit. Well, we're not going to let that stop us. And we haven't. And we've kept on battling and kept on trying to make great works, and hopefully people will eventually take notice.
What do you want to say about Lord of Two Horns? How do you compare it to the previous albums?
Well, it's definitely the most intense and extreme drawn and quartered album that we've made. Credit there largely to Simon because he's a maniac. And so the material was written in part to utilize his strengths, and it most certainly does. I just probably say Lord of Two Horns is like the essence of drawn and quartered distilled down to its most straightforward and extreme. Just no holds barred, relentless death metal with not forgetting some atmosphere and evil melody here and there. So it's not just all mindless brutality,
Yeah.
but also the songs are well written and the riffs will stick in your head, which is not something that is the case for a lot of bands today. Although it seems that a lot of people don't want that anymore and would rather have lots of dissonance and whatnot, which has its place. But we're definitely more from the old school of a riff that you can hear going through your head later, in addition to just getting brutally beaten.
Is the riff king for Drawn and Quartered? Is Do you guys feel like you're a riff band?
A riff band?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you know, when I think of, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example, but maybe Dismember. You brought up Dismember, but like you pick a Dismember song. It's like riff after riff after riff of like like everything is memorable. Everything is
Yeah.
There's not a lot of filler.
They're a great example.
Yeah.
There's some albums they like out riff most bands halfway through the first song. And I don't know that I mean, not that we don't place a priority on that. We don't necessarily have to have every part like that because there are some times when it's cool and it's, we just like to do it to add a few parts that are a little more atmospheric or what have you, but they're used as, basically offset the riffier parts.
Do you want to speak at all about the lyrical themes and what you sing about on this album?
Mostly no surprises there from anyone that's familiar with drawn and quartered lyric content. Mostly horrific historical accounts and stories of people being killed and cut into pieces. And title track is about a story about sacrificing infants to the blood god. Yeah, pretty much uniformly horrible.
We didn't speak too much about your lyric writing process the last time. When you go into a song, do you have an idea that you want to flesh out? Is there a narrative that almost like a story that you want to put forth in a song?
There's a number of things a number of things that might happen. What I usually try to do is I like to be able to listen to the song for a while, get a good feel for it, and kind of let the song tell me what it should be about, if you know what I mean. Just try to get a feel of a feeling, an atmosphere, some sort of thing like that from the music itself. And separately, I'm usually working on just writing out lyrics for general use if I've read something interesting or whatever. And so then I'll often, kind of take the feeling I might get from a song and go reference some of the things that I've already been working on and see if they fit the bill or adapt them to that. Then other times there's There's some that I've basically just taken the song and taken it in a new direction with something that I haven't really worked out, an idea that I hadn't had before. So and I just flesh them out until I'm more or less happy with them, and there you go.
So while Kelly is working on the riffs and the arrangements, you're working on your lyrical ideas on your own. Do you ever have your ideas for vocal patterns or the lyrical structure influence the arrangements? Like if you want to bring a part back or have something like a section under something that you want to sing?
Mm, there have been not many times. There have been a couple of times that there have been some things we've done or we're going to do and that I thought weren't the right ones to do or whatever. But it isn't normally like this song needs to have a chorus 3 times and this thing only has it twice. And it's usually I'll just adapt the lyrics to the song situation. I would say that there has been some material in the past that Kelly has actually written lyrics for. And I think some of that may actually have been at least written sort of, basically thinking of both components at the same time versus like he writes the music and then I write the lyrics. Might be, kind of horror movie inspired concepts or something where the movie's inspiring both the musical idea as well as the lyrical idea. There's some stuff on The One Who Lurks that's like that.
last time we spoke about how Kelly has really taken over the recording and the producing of the albums. I think you said he's had that role for a long time. I think he handled the pre-pro early on with like 4 tracks and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a 4 track that's been participating in things since pretty much the beginning of the band, but more more directly, it's pretty much been since about the time of Proliferation of Disease, and just the circumstances at the time dictated that we were going to try to work out the recording ourselves. And so that's basically where that started. And it just kind of kept growing, so to speak, since then. And so, yeah, so over time gotten pretty good at getting good sounds. And so, yeah, it's about that.
Did Kelly have an audio engineering background, or did he learn?
I'm pretty sure no. I think it's just something that he's
Okay.
just learned on the job.
Yeah. And you guys are recording stuff in your own rehearsal space?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the drums? Where did you guys record the drums?
The drums actually have been recorded elsewhere. I could just say Simon's got a guy. His name's Chris Menino. His studio is called Die Burning Studio. That's what I know about it. But yeah, that's a situation where probably in common with a lot of productions these days, the drums are recorded at one place and other stuff's recorded at another place and other stuff's recorded at another place.
Yeah. I think a lot of bands are doing that these days, especially bands who have an in-house engineer, like a band member who's also an engineer.
Yeah. Technology has just made it so much easier over the years too. So
yeah. And Luc Fontaine from Crusader handled the mixing and mastering. So essentially it's the same team working on this album as Congregation Pestilence.
correct.
Yeah. As far as Luc's role, mixing the album and coming up with the masters, what did you want him to bring to the sound?
We basically just wanted him to bring the drawn and quartered out. Is to make us sound like we sound, try and just get the most fearsome, clear yet heavy, clean yet filthy sound that's possible.
Like I said, you guys have been pretty consistent throughout your career. Is that something that's important to you in the production side as well? Do you want there to be like a consistency or maybe a continuation from one album to another?
There's upsides and downsides to doing that. I wouldn't necessarily say yes, other than I would be more inclined to say that a lot of the consistency is a little more by necessity than by design. Also, if you've got one thing that does work, you're not necessarily going to immediately try something else if you're not sure that it's going to work just as well or better.
Right.
We will end up doing something different for the next recording, though, because I think Luke's basically retired, other than I think he's still doing some mastering jobs, but
okay.
The Crusader label is shut down.
I see. Okay. And they had handled the re-release of a lot of your albums.
Yeah, they released The One Who Lurks, Congregation Pestilence, and they also did a vinyl issue of Hail Infernal Darkness, Eternal Praise.
Okay. So you mentioned some of the live dates that you did supporting the last album. What do you have planned this time around? Are you guys going to be able to play any festivals or anything like that?
We hope to do everything. At this point, we're really still just getting those sorts of plans together, since we didn't have the release date until a few weeks ago ourselves. So that's all coming together. We definitely would like to, I'm sure we'll do some more US stuff. We'd really like to do more European stuff. We really want to get to South America. We'd love to go back and do Japan and more Asia stuff. There's all sorts of places that we need to visit.
Let's talk about the release because this one's coming out through Nuclear Winter Records,
Yep.
who you guys have had a relationship with for a long time. How did they end up releasing this album?
Well, it was, as I'd mentioned, Crusader basically shut down their label operations. And so as a result, the release had to be, we had to find someone else to do it. And Nuclear Winter was a natural choice, being previous association, and we have all really got along well. And I think they did good by us. So very happy that they're handling the release of it.
Was it a fairly recent development that they took on the role for releasing and promoting it?
Relatively, yeah. I mean, I think what's been going on with Crusader, or what did go on, I don't know I don't know all of, all of the details, but
Sure.
that's been in the works for a little while. But then the actual the question of who's going to release it was more addressed once we had the recording all done.
Right. So by the time people hear this episode, Lord of Two Horns will be out through Nuclear Winter Records. Herb, what's the best way to order the album? How can people get it?
You could order it from Nuclear Winter Records, obviously. You could order it from our Bandcamp. You can get in touch with our Facebook or our Instagram, although we might just refer you to the website. Probably Nameless Grave Records, most other, any distro worth their shit, of course, we'll be stocking it once it's out as well.
Do you want to say anything about the physical releases that Nuclear Winter is creating for this?
They look awesome. There's going to be a cassette, a CD, and an LP.
Cool.
The true format of metal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you said that you prefer the LP version.
Oh, yeah.
So that people can see the artwork in all its glory.
Yeah. Yeah. I just like the sound of vinyl much better than the sound of CDs anyway.
Yeah.
It's a richer sound.
So you mentioned your Facebook page, your Instagram. Is that the best place to go to get updates and maybe find out about what the touring situation will be like?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. Herb, it was great catching up with you. We actually ran into each other at MDF
Oh, yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
While I was waiting for the bus. The marvelously reliable Baltimore bus system.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it's cool seeing you there. I even saw Kelly at Northwest Terrorfest last year.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he knew what I was, but
Cool.
it was cool to run into you guys. Hopefully we'll get to see each other sometime soon.
Yeah.
I might be going to that Japanese festival that you guys played some years ago.
Oh, the Sakusa?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's killer.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll run into each other again. But it's cool catching up with you. Is there anything else you want to say?
Thanks to everyone who supports Drawn and Quartered, and hail Satan.
Hail Satan, hail death metal. Thanks so much, Herb.
Hail death metal. Thank you. Cheers.